Sometimes I think the wellness world has a very interesting habit. It takes something our families have known for generations. It gives it a new package, a new name, a beautiful label, calls it a superfood, and then sells it back to us like somebody just discovered it last Tuesday. And sometimes I look at it and think, wait a minute, we know this, we grew up with this. Moringa is one of the clearest examples for me. We knew it as never die. It was not something waiting to be discovered. It was already part of our lives. And now, moringa is everywhere. Powders, capsules, smoothie blends, supplements, wellness shelves. The same thing has happened with Baobab, what I know as bui. Something many of us grew up with is now packaged, branded, and sold back as a global wellness discovery. That is the part I want to talk about today. Not because everything we grew up with is suddenly a trend. Kenkeliba, for example, is not something I would call a trend right now. For me, Kenkeliba is personal. When I think about drinking Kenkeliba, I think about mornings growing up in Africa, breakfast, getting ready for school, my dad, that feeling of home before anybody was calling what we were doing a wellness routine. We were just living. Welcome back to the Queen Reset. I am Aja Jack, and today we are talking about the food, plant, and everyday wellness knowledge many of us grew up with, what we left behind, and what may still be worth bringing back with both ancestral wisdom and modern information in the room. And this is one of the reasons ancestral wellness matters to me so much, because I'm not only interested in nostalgia. I'm a certified holistic health coach. Food, nutrition, vitamins, minerals, lifestyle, and the way we support the body through daily choices are part of what I studied. So when I talk about the foods and plants many of us grew up with, I'm looking at them through several lenses at once. What did our families traditionally know? What do I personally use? What do we understand nutritionally today? And what is modern research still learning? Those things do not have to compete with one another. Take never die, moringa. Moringa leaves are genuinely nutrient dense. They contain protein, essential amino acids, vitamins, and minerals. I do not need to turn it into a miracle cure to respect its value. What fascinates me is that many African families did not need an influencer to explain that this plant was valuable. It was already part of food knowledge, traditional knowledge, daily life. Now moringa is everywhere. Powders, capsules, smoothie blends, supplement, wellness shelves. And I think there is something worth noticing here. The plant did not suddenly become valuable because the global wellness industry noticed it. The value was there. What changed was who was paying attention. Bui is another one for me, Baobab. I love bui. I add Baobab powder to my oatmeal. I put it in my chia bowls. I make Baobab or bui juice. And nutritionally, Baobab pulp is particularly rich in vitamin C. So when I see Baobab powder now being marketed as this exciting wellness ingredient, I smile a little because, again, we know this. Maybe we did not always have the laboratory language. Maybe grandmother was not sitting there discussing micronutrient composition, but the food was already part of life. Then there is Fonio. Fonio takes me somewhere completely different. Fonio reminds me of my aunts. It reminds me of the big family house and me walking from one apartment to another with a spoon. Because at mealtime, you had to show your face. You couldn't just disappear. You went to one aunt, you tasted what she cooked, then you went upstairs, downstairs, or next door and tasted somebody else's food. Because if they did not see you, somebody was going to ask, where's Aja? Did she eat? Why didn't she come here? And somebody might actually be offended that you ate the other auntie's food but didn't taste hers. So you had your spoon and you made your round. And now, when I think about that, I realize something. The food mattered. But the food was also carrying something else: community, belonging, being seen. The meal said, you were here today. You ate with us. You belong to this family. And I think we lose something when we reduce food only to calories, protein, carbohydrate, vitamins, and what is supposedly good or bad. Those things matter. I'm a holistic health coach. Of course, they matter to me. But nourishment is larger than nutrient chores. Food is memory. Food is relationship. Food is identity. Food is somebody asking whether you ate. Food is sitting together. Food is your aunt adding more to your plate after you already told her you full, because apparently your opinion on whether you are full is irrelevant. Food is connection. And this is why I don't want ancestral nutrition to become another restrictive wellness trend. I'm not saying throw away everything modern. Eat exactly like your great-grandmother. Go backward. That is not realistic. And it is not necessary. I live in the modern world. I use modern conveniences. I buy groceries in modern stores. The question I keep coming back to is much simpler. What did we know that is still worth knowing? What food were part of our lives before we decided they were too old-fashioned? What grains did we stop using? What greens? What leaves? What teas? What preparation methods? What foods were once ordinary and now appear on a wellness shelf at 5 times the price? Fonio is a good example of that shift too. It is an indigenous West African cereal that is now attracting growing international attention for its nutritional and culinary properties. But I do not want the takeaway from this episode to be go buy Fonio, moringa, and Baobab because I just say so. That's too small. I want you to think about your lineage. What food makes you think home? What drink? What smell? What recipe? What did the woman in your family know how to make? What ingredient did you grow up seeing all the time that you barely use anymore? And maybe your answer has nothing to do with my foods. Maybe you're from another part of Africa and you have a completely different name for the same plant. Maybe the preparation is different. Maybe you are Caribbean, Black American, Afro-Latin, from the diaspora somewhere else entirely. That's what I love about this conversation. I will tell a story and somebody will say, wait, we do that too. Different country, different language, same feeling. That is why I often say Africa rather than trying to make every tradition belong to only one place. Our cultures are different, but they are threads that travel. And one of those threads is the understanding that food is part of how people care for one another. Before I give you the practice, I want to make this even more practical because reconnecting with an ancestral food does not have to mean changing your entire kitchen overnight. Sometimes the first sign of disconnection is very ordinary. You realize you know exactly how to order a trendy grain bowl, but you have forgotten how your family prepared the grain you grew up eating. You know the price of a wellness powder, but not the name of the leaf your aunt used to put in a pot. You can explain protein, fiber, and antioxidant, but you have never asked why a certain food always appears after illness, after childbirth, during a particular season, or when somebody needed strength. And sometimes the disconnect is not even nutritional, it is emotional. You stop making a food because you thought it smelled too strong. You stop bringing it to work because you did not want questions. You stop serving it to your children because you thought they would prefer something more familiar to the country you now live in. Then 20 years later, the same ingredient appears in a beautiful package with the wellness label on it, and suddenly everybody is interested. That is worth noticing. Not so we can become angry every time somebody else enjoys something African. That is not the point. The point is to ask why we sometimes needed outside approval before we could see value in what was already ours. And I want to give you 4 questions you can use with any traditional food or plant you are curious about. First, what did my family actually use this for? Not what social media says. What did the people around you do with it? Second, what is actually in it nutritionally? This is where modern nutrition information can help. Does it provide fiber, vitamin C, minerals, protein, healthy fats, plant compounds? Third, what does current research support and what is still only traditional use? Those are not the same category, and we do not have to pretend they are. Fourth, does this fit my body and my life now? Something can be traditional and still not be right for every person, every condition, every medication, or every stage of life. That is discernment. And here is another example. Maybe your grandmother cooked a dish with a lot of leafy greens, beans, whole grains, herbs, and vegetables. But the version you remember also used more oil, salt, or sugar than feels good for your body today. You do not have to choose between rejecting the dish and reproducing it exactly. You can adapt. Keep the green, keep the grain, keep the flavor, keep the memory. Adjust the preparation. That is not disrespecting tradition. That is living tradition. Tradition has always adapted to what people had, where they lived, and what they needed. So here is the practice I want to leave you with. Pick one thing. Not an entire ancestral diet, one thing. One food, one drink, one recipe, one plant. Bring it back into your week. Then get curious. Ask an elder how they used it. Ask why they used it. Learn its nutritional profile. Look at what modern evidence says. Notice where tradition and modern nutrition agree. Notice where research is still developing. You do not have to choose between ancestral knowledge and modern information. Use both. That is part of holistic wellness too. And if somebody who knows the recipe is still here, ask them now. Write it down. Because knowledge does not always disappear dramatically. Sometimes somebody passes away, nobody asks. And suddenly, nobody knows exactly how she made the thing everybody loved. That is lost too. So when I drink my Kenkeliba, I am drinking something traditional. But I am also remembering my father. When I use Never Die, I'm using a nutrient-dense plant that I grew up knowing before much of the wellness world became interested in moringa. When I add buey to my breakfast, I know I'm using a food that naturally provides vitamin C. And when I think about Fonio, I can still see myself with that spoon moving from one auntie's home to the next. Nutrition, memory, community, ancestry, wellness. They do not have to live in separate boxes. Maybe returning to our roots is not about going backward. Maybe it's about becoming wise enough to recognize what was valuable before somebody else renamed it for us. Thank you for listening. And I want to know this one. What is one food, drink, or plant from your childhood that the rest of the world suddenly seems to have discovered? Tell me. I know we are going to have stories. Thank you for remembering alongside me. This is the Queen Reset. I'm Aja Jack. Welcome back, my queen.
So God broke it down just to realize